I just think it's an important part of our history, and that now that we know about it.
Tonight, a potential major discovery in Winnipeg.
The question is, how are we going to address it so that it doesn't happen again?
2 years after a devastating fire in northern Manitoba, a family is suing for unsafe conditions.
We're so excited.
And the Arctic Winter Games announced the next host city. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin tonight in Winnipeg, where an unmarked cemetery has been discovered near what used to be an orphanage and home for unwed mothers in the early 20th century. The orphanage had a high death rate, and it's believed there may be unmarked graves of children and infants. Sav Jonesa has more.
An attempt to preserve a forest in South Winnipeg took a turn with the discovery of an unmarked cemetery for a former orphanage and home for unwed mothers. Advocates are now calling on the city to hold off developing the area and to investigate. Shelley Sweeney, Archivist Emerita for the University of Manitoba, is the one who found the site while researching LeMay Forest in Winnipeg's St. Norbert suburb. A member of Ours Winnipeg, a green space advocacy organization who want the forest to be preserved.
I just think it's an important part of our history, and that now that we know about it, maybe if you didn't know about it, that would be one thing, but now that we know about it, I think the moral and ethical thing to do is to consult with the communities and say, how should we handle this?
The Catholic orphanage called Asile Rocheau was run by the Sisters of Miséricorde from 1904 to 1948. According to surviving records at the St. Boniface Historical Society, around 7,000 children passed through the institution. The ethnicity of around 2,700 children was recorded. 225 were Métis, 6 were First Nations, and 1 was Inuit. The death rate of children at Asile Rocheau was high, especially in the early years of its operation.
In 1909, out of 314 children that were accepted into the asile, 188 died. So that's a death rate of 599 to 1,000 live births. When I found another statistic from 1910, the standard across Canada was 262. So substantially lower than the death rate at the asile.
Records from the St. Boniface Historical Society suggest that somewhere between over 1,200 and 2,000 children died there during its operation. The exact location of the cemetery is unknown, but Sweeney thinks a bare spot within the mature forest might be it. According to Sweeney, an unmarked grave is believed to have stored multiple human remains of some of these children.
The cemetery was divided into quadrants, and for the children whose parents or parent could not pay for a separate burial, or a separate burial plus a headstone, that they would open, but it doesn't say what, a trench, a pit, and that the children would be buried at that time.
Various sources and reports contradict whether the remains were moved and the cemetery deconsecrated after the orphanage closed. Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is now asking the City of Winnipeg to investigate. APTN obtained a letter sent by Grand Chief Kathy Merrick to Winnipeg's Mayor, Scott Gillingham. It reads, in part, "We take this news very seriously, and our hearts go out to the family and nations of these little ones who were not given the opportunity to return home, even after they died. It is with heavy hearts but solid determination we will seek to repatriate these little ones so they can be laid to rest in the care of their loved ones." Sweeney and other members of Ours Winnipeg presented their findings to the City of Winnipeg Council earlier today. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. September 4th, 2022 is a day many will not forget. It was the day 11 people lost their lives and 17 others were injured in the tragic stabbings on James Smith Cree Nation. Our Saskatchewan video journalist Rachel May spoke with Vanessa Burns, the ex-partner of the killer and the daughter of one of his victims.
As the James Smith Cree Nation inquest is set to begin next week, Vanessa Burns is feeling a lot of emotions.
More anxious and nervous at the same time.
Burns is the ex-partner of Miles Sanderson, who was identified as the sole killer in the stabbing attacks that took place September 4th, 2022. The pair split up in May of 2022, months before the stabbings. Burns is in a unique situation. She lost her father, Earl Burns, during the tragedy. She says that tragedy hit her family hard.
It's like a void kind of thing. But we've accepted it and we're just ready to move on. And I know his siblings and my grandfather are really hurt, and yeah, I pray for them too, that they move on and find strength in this.
Burns says that her healing journey took some time to get started.
I first reached out in December of 2022, to that therapist that was given to us. I think mental health was offered to us, so I reached out.
Burns has been receiving mental health supports. She says it's been helping. When it comes to the inquest, Burns hopes that this helps everyone on their healing journey.
A lot of people that want their questions answered, and I hope that they get closure and they can start their healing as well.
The James Smith Cree Nation inquest starts on January 15th at 10 a.m. in Melfort at the Kerry Vickers Centre. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
2 years after a fire claimed the lives of 3 children on a First Nation in northern Manitoba, the parents of the victims are suing their leadership for providing unsafe housing. Tamara Pimentel has those details.
A February 2022 fire on the Cross Lake First Nation claimed the lives of 3 children. 2 years later, their parents, Melody and Patrick North, filed a lawsuit against the nation, seeking more than $300,000 in damages. The claim states 17-year-old Kobe, 13-year-old Jade, and 2-year-old Reed burned to death in a blaze that happened while the family was asleep. The claim says due to a housing shortage, the First Nation provided the family with a temporary COVID-19 structure to live in. It failed to meet fire code. The family woke up to smoke, with the fire blocking the only door.
You're living in third world conditions here.
Martin Pollock is the lawyer representing Melody and Patrick.
They've suffered tremendous trauma, and they're going to require appropriate redress and counseling. The devastation of loss is so wide.
According to the claim, Melody ran to the closest house to call the First Nations Fire Department. They took half an hour to respond and arrived without water or proper equipment to battle the fire.
How does a community respond to fire? You know, there was no water. There were no fire extinguishers inside the premises.
Statistics Canada shows people living on First Nations are 10 times more likely to die in a fire compared to other Canadians. Arnold Lazar with the Indigenous Fire Marshal Service says overcrowding and improper infrastructure is a recipe for disaster. He says his organization is working on getting smoke detectors and fire extinguishers into remote homes while educating communities.
If we can get the people that have the resources to invest in the community, then it works.
Pollock says the lawsuit is meant to hold Cross Lake First Nation accountable.
The question is, how are we going to address it so that it doesn't happen again?
None of these allegations have been tested in court, and Cross Lake First Nation has not responded to our request for a comment. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Alberta now, where arrests were made yesterday as the Edmonton Police Service attempted to close the final encampment of homeless people that they deemed a risk to public safety. APTN's Chris Stewart has the latest.
It was not a peaceful takedown of this camp near downtown Edmonton. In a statement, Edmonton police say demonstrators, including 1 man and 2 women, were arrested for obstruction. One of those women with freelance Indigenous journalist Brandy Morin. She is due in court on February 1st. According to the police statement, the man involved is facing an additional charge from an incident the previous day, where both he and an officer were slightly hurt. This morning, there was nothing left of the encampment besides a few items scattered around and a roll of police tape on the ground. The Coalition for Justice and Human Rights is suing the city, saying that removal of encampments puts vulnerable people in danger and violates their rights. A decision on if Edmonton police can continue to take down camps will be made soon. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
For more on the clearing of the encampments in Edmonton, we're joined by Aaron Paquette. He is Cree and Métis and the city councillor for Ward Dene in Edmonton. Paquette sits on a committee looking at encampment and unsheltered homelessness response plan. He joins us from Edmonton. Councillor Paquette, thanks so much for being with us here. Many people are seeing the video and images out of Edmonton, the police physically removing some people, many of them Indigenous, from these camps. What are your thoughts on what's happening?
Yeah, so we've got to take it back a little bit and take a look at why we have the encampments in the first place. And of course, most people will know that shelters, housing, and mental health and addictions are all provincial responsibilities. So on the city level, what we have to look at is, are encampments safe and are they fit for human habitation? And for the most part, that's generally been yes. But sometimes APS, our Edmonton Police Services, will come to us and say, we've got these specific concerns, or our firefighters will come and say, we've got these specific concerns. And if it's deemed high risk, as in people are literally in danger, then they can go and remove these encampments. And then the city, our role is simply to just go and clean up. Because as you may or may not know, municipalities do not direct our police services.
The daytime high in Edmonton over the next few days is hovering around the -30 mark. That's not with including the wind chill. Where are all of these people going to go?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? So the province has provided 1,700 shelter spaces, but we know that our homeless count is larger than that. There are also empty spots in these shelter spaces, and so the question is why? Why are there these empty spots? Why would people rather risk being outside in this extreme weather than go to a shelter space? And so as a result of that, the city actually drafted minimum shelter standards for the province to follow that would actually increase people's willingness to go to shelter spaces. As of yet, those standards have not been instituted or employed.
Now, you've spoken about the idea of Indigenous-led and managed camps. Can you tell us more about that plan and how that would work?
Yeah, so it's actually an idea that came from my cookums. And the idea is that we would have an Indigenous-led shelter that was sanctioned by the city of Edmonton, because if the province isn't stepping up to solve this problem, then we can't just ignore it. It's here. So we've got to do something that makes sense, is practical, and also compassionate. And so if folks are leery of going to shelters, maybe they can go to this Indigenous-led encampment that has 24/7 security to keep them safe. It would have water, it would have showering facilities, things like that. It would have transitions into maybe pods or those sort of oil-filled shelters, and then moving on into finding a home or finding recovery or finding supports. And in this way, we can not only help people immediately in a way that is sensible and keeps them safe, but it also helps them move into a better life, or at least a life where they are cared for those who are unable to care for themselves at this time.
Well, Councillor Paquette, this is a big discussion right across the country for sure, and many of our relatives that are out there, so we hope that everybody stays safe during this cold snap here, and appreciate you taking some time for us as well.
Oh, my pleasure. And, one thing that we're always looking for, as you know, is because most of our homeless are Indigenous. Where's the federal government on this, right? So thank you for taking the time to speak with me, and lots of questions and lots of work to go.
Time now to step aside for a quick break, but still to come, the Arctic Winter Games, which are among my personal favorites, have announced the next host city. Details on that and more after the break. Welcome back. Well, it is now official. After the COVID pandemic derailed the 2020 Whitehorse Arctic Winter Games, the capital city has been confirmed as the hosting city for the 2026 Arctic Winter Games. Our reporter, Sarah Connors, tells us what that means for organizers and athletes alike.
These Yukon athletes are practicing for the 2024 Arctic Winter Games. In just a few months, they'll travel to Matsu, Alaska to compete in the Arctic Sports Division. But 2 years from now, the Games will be much closer to home. On Monday, officials announced Whitehorse as the host city for the 2026 Games.
We're so excited. I'm relieved that that formal step is complete and now we can get rolling.
The biennial event promotes friendly competition while also celebrating northern regions around the world. The Games were scheduled to take place in Whitehorse in March of 2020, the very same month COVID-19 began to spread across the country.
It is out of an abundance of caution today that as Chief Medical Officer of Health for Yukon, responsible for the public health in the Yukon, that I have recommended the cancellation of the 2020 Arctic Winter Games that were scheduled to be held here in Whitehorse beginning next week.
We spent years planning, hundreds of volunteers. We had 3,000 volunteers ready to go for the actual Games time week. And to have it canceled that way because of a pandemic was really emotional.
The goal now is planning, and lots of it. Organizers will have just 2 years, less than the usual amount of time, but they're not deterred.
We also have all of those plans from 2020 that we're going to be able to spread out and figure out what we can leverage, what we can still use. And so for those reasons alone, I think that we're already one step ahead.
And we got to teach you guys failure. You guys not failure. It's a lesson.
For athletes in the Yukon, it's a chance to showcase talent in their own backyard.
It's just a lot of camaraderie, good spirit, everyone's cheering for each other, so it'd be nice for a lot of people that live in Whitehorse or just in our territory in general to be able to come and actually witness that, and hopefully we get a lot of eyes on the competition at that time.
Actually, yeah, that's pretty cool. If I'm not competing then I can still watch it really easy.
The Games are scheduled to take place in March 2026. A launch event is underway for community members to get involved with planning. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Exciting stuff. Thanks for that, Sarah. Last week, youth from 7 Nunavut communities took part in the NU Moves. It's an after-school program which included training in Winnipeg and even a chance to attend a Winnipeg Jets game while in town. The training was facilitated by the Recreation and Parks Association of Nunavut. Leadership development, team building exercises, program planning, and first aid training were included. Youth from Pangertung, Baker Lake, Whale Cove, Kagluktuk, Igloolik, Cambridge Bay, and Joe Haven participated. The participants will now be leading after-school programs in their respective communities. Over the last 2 years, the organization has trained about 15 youth to lead after-school programs across the territory. Great sounding program. Well, the House of Commons may still be on its winter break, but our weekly political show, Nation to Nation, is back following a 2-week hiatus. We've got a preview of tonight's show coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. This is an early morning sundog that was captured by a red horse. He's the firekeeper at Camp Morgan in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Thanks for sharing the photo with us, and we hope you stay warm during these frigid temperatures here in Winnipeg. If you want to be featured as our photo of the day, send your pics to share@aptn.ca. Well, Winnipeg isn't the only place experiencing a deep freeze. Parts of Nunavut will be warmer than a majority of the prairies tomorrow. Here's a look at what's in store for your Friday weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 0 in Charlottetown and Halifax. -13 with snow in Kuujjuaq, 10 below and snow in Nain. -5 in Montreal, 14 below in Val-d'Or. -7 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, 10 below for North Bay. Snow and -10 in Thunder Bay, flurries and 16 below in Sioux Lookout. -22 with snow in God's Lake and Norway House. 18 below with snow in Winnipeg, -23 with snow in Dauphin. Snow and 25 below for Regina, -28 with snow in Saskatoon. Flurries and 31 below in Meadow Lake, 36 below in Uranium City. In northern Alberta, -40 for Grand Prairie, 34 below in High Level. 30 below in Edmonton, snow and -32 for Lethbridge. -8 in Vancouver, sunny and 20 below in Kamloops. Sun's out and -28 for Prince George, 32 below in Dease Lake. -42 in Old Crow, 30 below in Whitehorse. -37 in Yellowknife, snow and -34 in Norman Wells. -27 in Sax Harbor, 26 below for Pawlatuck. -23 in Chesterfield, 31 below in Baker Lake. -24 in Resolute, 34 below in Joe Haven. -5 in Iqaluit, not bad. Well, it's time to head over to our Ottawa studio now. That's where Fraser Needham is standing by to tell us what is on the first episode of the new year of Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the news on Nation to Nation, it's a new year with lots happening in Ottawa. We'll talk to Cindy Blackstock of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. She is once again taking the federal government to task. This time it's for failure to comply with Jordan's principle when it comes to providing health services for First Nations children in a timely manner. This week, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission gave the green light to build a disposal site for nuclear waste at Chalk River Laboratories in Deep River, Ontario. We'll talk to Kaberawak First Nation Chief Lance Heyman about why he thinks this is a bad idea. And McGill University Professor Veldon Coburn joins us to talk about what we might see in the new year when it comes to Indigenous priorities and the federal government. All this ahead in a few minutes.
Thanks, Fraser. Lots going on there to look forward to. You can catch Nation to Nation right here in less than 2 minutes' time. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for this Thursday. You can find much more over on our website. That's aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Stick around. Nation to Nation's next. We'll see you back here tomorrow.